Hello and welcome. I'm Tom Sinclair, and you have gotten to Streaming Idiots. You're probably here by accident, so you're free to just change the channel to somewhere else. But if you like streaming and if you feel like you're not completely competent at doing it, then you are in the right place. We are going to talk about streaming and all things streaming. Today we have a very special guest. We've got Mitch Jackson, an attorney out of California, who's going to talk to us about copyrights. And so we'll bring Mitch on in just a second. And you want, if you haven't already, you'll want to get a notebook and a pencil so that you can make some notes on this show. Well, the show's going to be rebroadcast. I mean, it's available on YouTube at easternshorebroadcasting.com. Anytime you want to, you can go there and see a rerun of this, so you can pull the notes out at your leisure. And you know, you won't want to do this for Mitch, but you probably will want to do it for me. You know, on YouTube, when you're watching something that's been previously recorded, you can change the play speed. So you can speed it up and you can hear me at twice the normal speed. Imagine what that would be. You can also cut it in half and make it go slow if you want to. You probably don't want to. A lot of stuff going on in the streaming world. They just introduced a 4K webcam this week. Blackmagic had a lot of cool stuff that they've introduced. If you haven't already, you probably, let's put this up for just a second. You'll want to join our Facebook group because that's where you can stay up with a lot of this stuff. It's facebook.com/group/streaming idiots, and you can be a part of the group at that point. And I also want to welcome those folks that have joined the group since last week. I mean, we've just been overwhelmed with folks that are joining, and we're delighted that you're here. Luke Austin, Martin Hofling, Rick Armentrout, Andreas Lindermark, Tony Kassar, Larry Megan, Trevor Albert, Rafael Oramas, Shiri Kanta Sahu, sorry I butchered that one, I'm sure, Kyle Hillman, Stephanie Fleischer, Adam Drainsfield, Demago Crepin, Hayden Lombard, John O'Malley, Scott Bone, Tillen Kegel, Timothy Moon, Maurice Harmon, Steve Topic, Greg Kuliga, James Miller, Frank Chitz, Daniel Tremblay, Reginald Mahomey, Garrett Burge, Dusty Austin, Braxton Nutt, Richard Felix, Cinco Van Koolen, Paulo Madeira, Pontus Maltborg, James Lowry, Kevin Plant, and James Goldie. Welcome to the Facebook Live Streaming Idiots group. We hope it's going to be a real benefit to you. I noticed some of you guys have already posted on there. And for folks that have just joined our YouTube subscribers, Cinco Van Koolen again, William Golden Jr., Ahmed Handy, Washington Ignacio, there we go. Cedric Pollard, Ngozi at Night, Gavin Davis, Dreg 14, Democracy Live Scott, Maurice Harden, Cleveland Albuquerque, Charles Norby, Keetwan Brooks, Ulysses Modriquez, Check One Media, Raina Luthi, and Complete Jewish Bible. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't already subscribed to us on YouTube, please do. They'll send you a notice when we're live and also when we post a new video. And if you join the Streaming Idiots group, then of course you get to hear all the cool stuff right when it happens. So I will point out that on the Streaming Idiots group today, Dan Slider with PI Engineering, those are the folks that make the X keys. He has posted a poll because he wants to get some input on how to design their next series of X keys. So go to Facebook/groups/Streaming Idiots and go ahead and check that out. And if you've got an opinion on it, go ahead and let him know because they need to know an answer. They want to know about the color of a button, as to what color is going to be the best for end users. Kind of nice to have a manufacturer ask those kind of questions, don't you think? All right, let's see. Let's bring Mitch in. Mitch is I would say he's a unique attorney. number one, he seems pretty nice, which is pretty unique, at least in my experience. He combines law and technology and social media, and he's a disruptor is what he is, and he is trying to help people in his field improve not only their legal technique but their business technique, their methods, their systems. He's spoken about the law and technology and social media all over the place. He's been a trial lawyer for 30 years. In 2013, he was California Litigation Lawyer of the Year. In 2009, he was Orange County Trial Lawyer of the Year. I mean, this guy, we don't want to mess with him. That's for sure. We want to have him. We want to have him as one of our friends. So let me bring his mic up and let's bring him on. Mitch, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Tom, it's good to be here. It's my pleasure. And by the way, absolutely love the title of your show, Streaming Idiots. I can't speak for you, but it's perfect to have me on this show, okay? Best live streaming show I've been on.
Thank you. The concept behind it, Mitch, is, to some degree, this is new technology for most everybody, and we're all going to make a ton of mistakes. And, what the heck? Let's go ahead and admit that up front, get it out of the way, and say, none of us is perfect. And so we're not going to be critical of each other. We're going to be helpful of each other. And that's been a good thing. That's been a good thing.
It's a good thing. And that's when I'm speaking. And thank you for the very, very kind introduction. I just love this stuff. Okay. This is, besides motocross racing and technology, I also happen to practice law. That's kind of the order of things. And I've ridden and raced motocross for 38, 39 years. And I try to tell other lawyers out there, show your human side. It's okay to make mistakes, especially with technology. People relate to other human beings. None of us are perfect. We all do silly things. And when you're on live stream, it happens with the world watching. And that's okay, right? Nobody really cares.
And it's right there. Yeah, you can't cover it up. Absolutely.
Well,
you are here today because, number one, several people suggested you by name. They didn't say go out and get a California attorney, somebody that knows a little bit about media and technology and something. They said, get Mitch Jackson. So you're the guy. And a lot of the viewers of this show have had problems in the past. In fact, I've got an email right here that I've been asked to kind of throw out to you and get your opinion on once we get going. But the whole issue of copyrights, music, videos, live performances, recorded performances, all of that. Can you kind of give us some help there? Tell us, maybe explain for those folks that don't even know what a copyright is. Let's start there and then sort of work our way through that chain.
Sure. And it's never been more important with the rolling out of social media, digital, and now with live streaming. A picture's worth 1,000 words, right? But when it comes to a copyright lawyer, his or her favorite words are cease and desist. So it's really, really important that everybody appreciate the intellectual property issues involved with live streaming. And just to put some things into context, Tom, some of the things we'll be talking about are things that I've actually litigated about. This isn't theory. A lot of it's common sense approaches to help everybody avoid copyright, intellectual property issues. I realized this was really, really important stuff the first time I traveled back to New York and spoke at Periscope Summit. I was on a panel and we talked about these things when Periscope first rolled out. And it was a very popular panel discussion. We then rolled over to San Francisco the next year and we had a line. It looked like I was on stage looking at the Department of Motor Vehicles. There was a line there of entrepreneurs who had questions about what we're going to talk about today. So I'm all in on digital. I'm all in on live streaming. And because of that, I just enjoy sharing my thoughts on intellectual property and copyright law. And the bottom line, I think what everyone needs to understand is what applies offline in the business world when it comes to copyrights and trademarks and trade names and service marks, intellectual property. What applies offline applies online. Primarily, it's the same rules and regulations. The difference is what I'm seeing is a lot of people firing up their smartphone, right? Which I love. This thing's awesome. And going live. And while they're going live, they're sharing intellectually protected photos, music, videos, and things like this. They're breaking the law, both state and federal, and they don't realize it.
Right.
Now, I'm one of those lawyers where I tell my clients, Tom, I want you to encourage other people to share your material. I want you to encourage people to share your content on your websites, okay? I'm a big believer that things are changing. And to get your voice heard out in the world, you need people sharing your content. So I tell my clients, take a deep breath, don't get all wrapped up on the intellectual property rights stuff, and encourage your visitors to share your stuff. Having said that, copyright law still applies in today's world, and people need to pay attention to it.
I had a situation about 6 months ago. I do live streaming at my church, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that specifically in just a minute. But as we did with today's show, we kind of had a pre-show where you and I talked a little bit, and even before that, while the show was waiting to get started, I had a screen up there and had some music playing on it. Well, at the church, they had some background music playing before the service, and we broadcast the service on YouTube, and sure enough, YouTube picked up on a minute's worth of that background music and immediately flagged that video as having copyrighted content.
Sure.
Within an hour. It was amazing.
The technology is catching up with monitoring everything that we're talking about. And I'm speaking next week at Summit Live in Los Angeles. I'll be on stage with Robert Scoble, who used to be with Microsoft. Everybody knows Robert. With Al Roker, who's really big time into live streaming. And the reason I'm up there is to share what you just said and what we're going to talk about today with 1,000 creators in the audience. And eventually the technology, Tom, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, will be automatically monitoring everything we do. And it will allow creators to know ahead of time before they post or share if they're violating somebody's copyright, if they're violating somebody's trademark. And I'm really excited about these algorithms that are being developed right now that will help protect all of us from getting into trouble. But until then, I'm going to share some of the tips that I'm sharing today, because until that rolls out, we need to monitor ourselves. And let's talk a little bit about what copyrights are, because that's the first thing. What people need to understand is that when you create something, whether it's a blog post, you write a blog post, a book, you produce a movie, you create an image, whatever it might be, if you're the creator of that item, you have the copyright. You're the owner of that item. You have the exclusive rights, generally speaking, to use that item for pretty much anything that you want to use it for. That's the general rule. And I like to tell people in my audiences, if you're using somebody else's picture, video, song in the background, you're at a restaurant shooting somebody's karaoke performance, and you don't have permission from that person or from the band whose music you're listening to share that on live stream, the general rule is you probably don't have the right under intellectual property rights law to do what you're doing. So if you didn't create the content, you probably don't have the right to use it. But there are a few exceptions. And before we get into those exceptions, what I always tell people is reach out to the creator of the content and ask permission before you use it. That's the first step, right? So if I see an image that I'd like to use in a blog post or in a PowerPoint during one of my presentations, and Tom, you created it, I didn't, I need to reach out to you and try to get your permission. And whether I get your permission in an email, a text, using formal documentation, obviously the more documentation, the better, then that's the way to do it. But there are some exceptions that would allow me to use your picture or even this show if I chose to do so under the fair use exception. And we can talk a little bit more about that later on in the show. But the general rule, guys and gals, is if you didn't create the content, then please don't use it without the creator's permission.
And I think everybody probably agrees with that and sees the fact that, that's the right way to play the game. You don't steal somebody's lunch. And when people make money off their own content and you use it, then in essence, you're stealing their lunch. But a lot of what we're running into is an inadvertent or accidental situation where somebody's live streaming a parade and the band is playing a song in the parade. or somebody's live streaming a basketball game, and in the timeout, the arena plays music during the timeout. And those things are being flagged by Facebook and YouTube. Those are the two I can think of right off the top. And sometimes within just a matter of minutes. And sometimes people have had their streams taken down. Their live stream has been shut down because of that copyright violation in what was
Well,
just background.
it's not, an alleged violation. It is a violation under current law. And it doesn't matter that somebody, and don't get me wrong, I get it. And I've done it myself. Okay. It's easy to do. But the reality is that, as you described, Tom, those are copyright violations. People need to be aware of that. Just because we have more and more live streaming users not aware of the laws doesn't mean that they're not subject to the law.
Certainly.
Okay,
certainly.
ignorance of the law is no excuse. And so
That's right.
what I enjoy doing is just sharing, look, guys and gals, this is what the law is. Be aware of that, be smart about it. Now, the reality is what you just described, generally speaking, most companies, most bands aren't going to go after somebody who inadvertently, shares a halftime performance at a basketball game, in a high school basketball game. It's probably not something that's going to come back and bite you in the butt. But having said that, we have had clients call us who have live streamed at big concerts, and well-known influencers who then take that live stream, and when they put it out to their Twitter feed with millions and millions of people who are following them, there are issues. And the music companies, the bands, the producers, and all of their lawyers take exception to that. And so you've just got to be careful with how you go about sharing, even in an inadvertent fashion, somebody else's content. Now, there are some exceptions, Tom. And so the exceptions fall under the fair use.
Fair use. Okay, good.
Fair use. And unfortunately, it's not black and white. And I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Not because
What
of
part
you
of the
guys.
law is black and white? It's
Right.
all
Otherwise,
open
I'd
for
be out of
interpretation.
Yeah, so be careful with this. But here's the thing. If I take Tom's show, if I take Streaming Idiots, this show today, and I use it for a post that I do where I'm criticizing what Tom's doing, almost like a commentary. If I'm reporting
Easy
on
to
the
do.
news, no, it's not. But if I'm doing a news show about the Streaming Idiots and I show a clip from the Streaming Idiots, if I'm teaching a classroom and I'm showing Streaming Idiots up on a display screen, or I printed out copies of your show and I'm handing out color pictures of you and I right now to the class to talk about live streaming. If I'm using it for research, generally these are some areas that the courts have found it's not a copyright violation. These are exceptions under the fair use doctrine. The problem is it's usually not a black and white type of scenario. If the Evening News took a clip from this show, give you an example. I was on a show a few years ago with Katie Couric, who we all know and love as a news broadcaster. And something had happened earlier that day that regarding her that created a controversy. And later on that night, what we then found out is the episode, just like this, we were talking just like this, our episode ended up on TMZ nationally. Okay. And they took the clip and they didn't get anybody's permission. They didn't get my permission. They didn't get her permission, but they ran it as a news story / commentary story, which is fine. No big deal. But they had the right to do that. There are some situations where there's a question as to whether or not it's really a news story. Is it really being used as a commentary? Is it instead actually being used to sell a product or a service, to give the impression that Katie and I are endorsing your product or service? Okay, so it's masked in a way where it's a news story, but it's fake news, right? It's really selling the product.
Sure.
That's where you're probably going to get a cease and desist letter. That's when you'll probably find yourself at the losing end of a lawsuit. So I don't want to see people put themselves in that situation. And the fair use doctrine is an applicable doctrine. It has force and effect. Unfortunately, oftentimes what I see with the fair use doctrine is whoever has the best lawyer wins. And it can be an expensive exercise for everybody to find themselves engaged in. So instead of going that direction, reach out to the creator, try to get his or her permission to use the content in your live streaming show, and then you're good to go.
Okay. All right. That's the scenario where there are two parties. There's the content creator and the content user. And the scenario that we're running into is where there's a third party involved. And that third party is afraid of being sued by the creator because this third party has got deep pockets. This third party is Google or Zuck. And they don't want to get sued by somebody because Tom Sinclair inadvertently live streamed, Mick Jagger, who was playing during a timeout at a basketball game. And so that person, out of fear from this person, shuts me down, just shuts me down. And I'm a little guy, and I don't have any recourse at all, For example, I've got this letter here. Let me read you some of this because this is where we live. We are not likely going to be in a situation where we're going to take Mitch Jackson's video and reuse it in a way that is going to gain fame and fortune for us.
Tom, before you read your letter,
sure.
When you say we, I am part of you. I've had my content automatically taken down from Facebook or YouTube in the past.
Yeah.
So I've been there.
Yeah.
I understand what.
So what did you do? Did you fire off a nasty letter to the legal department at YouTube?
No, I realized I used somebody else's content improperly, and I shouldn't have done it. Okay. Not a big deal. Life's too short. There's so much that you and I can be doing. The last thing I'm going to spend my time on is taking on Google or Facebook when I've used somebody else's content inadvertently. And it's exactly as you mentioned. It was at a Supercross event where I was live streaming the event on Periscope and sharing it on Twitter. And what I didn't even think about was the music playing in the background. And the algorithm picked it up and chewed it up and spit it out, right? No big deal. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please read the email.
No, that's good.
So I've been there and done that,
I mean, the people that watch this show, they're going to be streaming curling. They're going to be streaming jet ski races. They're going to be streaming basketball, football, baseball, soccer. You name a sporting event that's indoors, outdoors, that's on the planet. And our viewers are streaming it, and they are bumping their heads into this thing. They're going, hey, look, we're just in the venue. Here's a slightly different case. This is from Giles, who has a TV show, internet TV show on Monday nights called This and That, and he live streamed it, and he had a backdrop, kind of like this backdrop right here, except it had some motion in it, and he downloaded it from a website that I'm not going to name. And the website said that this has a CCO public domain, free for commercial use, no attribution required. So he thought, oh, this is great. This is out in the public domain. I'll use it. Well, it turns out that the website that said it's in the public domain either didn't know or didn't tell that it wasn't really. It was just something that was uploaded and it was stolen from somebody else. And so he got flagged for it. And not only did he get flagged for it by YouTube, but they shut down his YouTube channel. And so he hasn't been able to stream on that channel. And as you know, if you do a lot of social media, when you develop a channel, even though, you may not be paying for it, it has a lot of value. There's a lot of value attached to the folks that regularly watch and listen and have subscribed to it. And I can go through the rest of the letter, but that's the essence of a situation where he was under the impression what he was doing met all the requirements for not fair use, but proper use.
So it's important to do your due diligence. And with respect to that particular example, what people need to understand, I'm just looking at some notes that I use when I speak, is, stock photo services, Creative Commons licenses, and public domain repositories of images are not subject to the fair use exception. In other words, you're generally purchasing that item and you're downloading it. And when you're purchasing that item, you're relying upon the fact that it's a reputable company that has the right to sell or license you that image, that backdrop that you're talking about.
Right.
So if I purchase a stolen vehicle from somebody on the street corner, it's a $30,000, car, and I buy it for $200 or not at all. Okay. The question is, do I have the right to do whatever I want with that stolen vehicle that I just bought for $200? And the answer is no, you don't in most states. Okay. At least here in California, you don't. And by the way, everybody, I'm licensed in California, and these are not legal opinions. These are just my thoughts.
I was waiting for this disclaimer.
No,
Yes.
but the point is it's the end doesn't justify the means. And so what all of us need to understand as consumers, especially those of us in business using digital, is you want to do your due diligence. You want to make sure that when you're purchasing or downloading any type of item that might be subject to intellectual property rights, pictures, videos, clips, whatever it might be, deal with reputable companies. Make sure that they have the ability to license you the rights to use it. And Tom, some of the issues we see here in California are expensive movie productions where an entire day's worth of shooting, hundreds of thousands of dollars of content that's being shot in a movie studio has to be scrapped because there's a BMW in the background that somebody didn't get permission to include in the shot. There's a Coca-Cola can in the background that Coca-Cola did not give the rights for that producer to use, or those rights weren't purchased, or whatever the case might be. So in the real world, where there's real big dollars involved, they do their due diligence. And frankly, for those of us that are small businesses, entrepreneurs, or solopreneurs, we have to do the same due diligence also. And I do see the law slowly changing, Tom. I see the law is always about 8 to 10 years behind technology, okay? And I do see eventually the law changing and hopefully being tweaked just a little bit to help make the implications or the penalties not as severe for an innocent consumer who thought he or she was doing the right thing and then found out after the fact that you didn't do the right thing. In other words, maybe be a little bit more flexible, because it's so much more easier today to be misled online with Photoshop, with some of the audio programs that are
But
out
if it's
now.
on the internet, Mitch, it's got to be true.
I understand that, you can quote me on that. And so, yeah, so the point being is we need to do our due diligence. And that not only includes intellectual property issues like we're talking about, but when you're doing business with somebody else, the majority of my phone calls, Tom, are people that have been scammed, people that have been taken advantage of by other people online who portray themselves as being legitimate business people, and they're not.
Right.
So it's just a concept of doing business that probably is more applicable today than it's ever been.
Okay, let's talk about a get out of jail free card, because everybody wants one. And there's some people that say they have them and that they will sell you one, like a BMI or a CCLI, a company that has secured the rights to lots and lots of music, for example, and will now sell you a license so that
Sure.
you don't get in jail. Explain that a little bit to us, if you will.
So I use those types of companies when I upload my drone footage over the Pacific Ocean. I like to add music to that. And I've got a couple of subscriptions where supposedly the music has, I've got permission to use it. And that's great. The way it works, though, is if the content that you're downloading, whether it's music, a photo, or a movie, from a company that doesn't actually have permission to use that, to sell you that content or license you that content, you can still find yourself at the wrong end of a lawsuit. But if that happens, what you can do as a consumer is, instead of just filing an answer to the lawsuit, you can cross-complain back against that third-party company. They've committed fraud and you're the victim of their fraud. They said that they had the right to sell you something and they didn't. They breached a contract, they were negligent, they may have committed intentional fraud or negligent fraud. So you have recourse to get reimbursed, indemnification. There are all types of things you can do. Unfortunately, to do everything I just described, it takes time, it takes energy, and it takes money. And so once again, the fallback and the common sense approach is do business with established companies who have good reputations, who know what they're doing, who other consumers are relying upon. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to be okay.
Okay, what about the licenses that you can buy?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe, what
Okay.
do you mean exactly by that?
All right. For example, in the field of Christian music, there is a music licensing company that will allow you, if you're a church and you're using popular Christian songs in your church,
Sure.
you have to have a license to do that. And so you
Okay.
buy the license, and it covers your use. It might cover the distribution of the lyrics in written form. It might cover the live performance by your own people
Sure.
of the song. It might cover the recorded performance of a particular artist where you're just playing the song. And so you're buying a license for that.
Yes.
Is there a
Yes.
way to buy a license for everything? I mean, can I buy a license that's going to cover me if somebody inadvertently streams or plays a popular song on their phone with Pandora in the background while I'm live streaming?
Probably not. I mean, the
Okay,
license you just described is a license that's being sold to you by somebody that has the legal right to sell you that license. In this case,
right.
the provider of the Christian music, whether it's the manager, the production company, or even the group. Uh, and so what a lot of people need to realize with licenses, though, is they're licensing you the rights to use that music for a particular purpose. In other words, maybe it's to also look at the license because you might only have the right to use that license in a church-sponsored event. If you take that music outside of that environment over to a monster truck event or a motocross event, or to help maybe to use as music for the intro to your show, Streaming Idiots, you might not have the right to do that. So many
Right.
licenses are focused on a particular right as opposed to a global type of use. So people need, that's another area I see people really getting caught by surprise with.
Now, wouldn't this be a great opportunity, though, for somebody in the licensing business to come up with a catch-all license that would cover I mean, I'm thinking about specifically what most people get ticked by is music. That's what the
Yeah.
algorithms seem to be recognizing right now. I don't know that the algorithms have gotten to the point where well, they did recognize the video in the background of my friend's video, so they're getting good enough to do that. Either that or the company that owned that had an algorithm that was scanning for it. Um, you know, I
So yeah. I mean, so it's the technology's catching up with the intellectual property rights and the law. When you look at a band like the Grateful Dead, who a friend of mine, David Merriman Scott, writes about, David's a gifted marketer, speaker, love his books. But the Grateful Dead from day one has always encouraged everyone at their concerts to videotape what's going on, record what's going on, share it with the world. They didn't care what you did at their concerts. Brilliant marketing play by them. They were ahead of their times. Today, when you go into a concert, most of the time you're not allowed to do anything. You're not even allowed. I just listened today driving into work. One of our local schools, a very well-known school, just came down with a new rule this morning prohibiting students from audio recording their professors during their lectures. So they can't play
Wow.
them back. They can't share them on the internet. And I'm not sure what the reasons are behind that, but if that's the decision they make, then the students have to comply with that, or they're in breach of school rules and regulations and intellectual property right laws that that professor or school may own, but based upon the contract of employment between the professor and school. Taking a step back and using that discussion as a foundation, it would be very, very tough for one entity, one company to be in charge of all the licensing rights associated with music, with movies, with activities. Okay, what we're normally seeing is a company that's unique to the movie industry. Say Netflix, for instance. When you sign up for a Netflix account, you acquire the rights. You acquire a license to watch as many movies as you want, depending on your plan, on any device that you want, wherever you are, 24/7. That's what the license says. And I'm paraphrasing, but it doesn't give you the right to then take that movie that you're streaming and use it in your backdrop right now, Tom, to help, let's just say, highlight some of the things that we're talking about. Unless, of course, it falls under that fair use exception
Right.
in one of the examples I gave. So it's tricky stuff, but I am excited about technology eventually making all of this easier for all of us. So that when we decide to do something and you create something, you'll click a button, it will submit the file or allow a cloud-based service to access the file on your laptop, your desktop, your mobile device, and it will give you a reading as to whether or not, on a scale of 1 to 100, whether or not the content you just created is appropriate, safe, and legal. And this is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, based upon the things that I'm reading, especially when you correlate artificial intelligence into everything else that we're talking about. And I think it's going to be great. It's going to be great for consumers. It's going to put some lawyers out of business, but I'm okay with that. There's other things to do.
There's plenty of business. Do you think that YouTube is afraid of a class action lawsuit?
Well, I can't speak for YouTube, but I do feel that there's a struggle right now with providers as to what hat they're wearing. Are they simply a conduit between you providing information with me, almost like a telephone line, for example? Without that telephone line connecting us, we wouldn't be able to talk on the phone. Or is it more than that? Are they actually a media company that somehow has a duty or a responsibility to monitor what type of content they allow people to produce and allow people to access? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm okay, personally, me as a dad, more so as a lawyer, with Google and YouTube making sure that the wrong type of content doesn't get disseminated around the world, sharing the wrong type of message. I mean,
Sure.
What is that? I mean, now we're talking free speech issues, and everything we're talking about falls back onto free speech. Who has the right to do what? I will tell everybody that when you're engaging with these companies, we have a term of service agreement. You're subject to their rules and regulations.
Right.
You don't have, it's like driving a car. You don't have the right to use Google. You're using Google subject to their terms and conditions. And so just be aware of what those terms and conditions are, which, by the way, 99.99% of all users never read the terms and conditions when they click the box. So you just be aware of those things.
Those terms and conditions were not written by regular people.
Nor do they need to be. I mean, the fact of the matter is, that's what I'm trying to say is the standard isn't what you and I think it should be. The standard is what the law says. And sometimes it's confusing even for lawyers to read all of the paragraphs and all the terminology that's contained in these documents. As a small business owner, if you have content that you're trying to protect, I would suggest putting together terms and conditions of your website, of your blog, of your live streaming show in plain, simple, and concise language so that everyone can understand it. And that way you're protecting yourself, you're protecting your users, you're protecting your audience. I'm really a big believer, Tom, in social media right now, and I love showing my human side. That's one of the advantages of I think with social for lawyers is we can hopefully build a better reputation in the community by showing our human side. We're just like everybody else. And I'm hoping that by all of us working together to keep our community safe, by sharing advice, by helping each other, I mean, it makes the world a better place for all of us. And I really do see live streaming as the tool that will allow us to eventually get to that point.
I like that. Folks, if you're just joining us, Mitch Jackson is our guest today, and we're talking about copyright issues and live streaming. And, and he's doing his job as a lawyer to stay onto the straight and narrow. There's a record of what he's saying. He's got to say it right. Mitch, let's see if we can't get some questions from the chat room. I've seen some questions pop by, but folks, if you've got a question that hasn't already been answered, go ahead and post it now. What I was hearing earlier today, Mitch, is that we have about a 5 to 7 second latency between the time you and I say it and it gets heard on the other end. And with YouTube, that's probably the best I've ever heard with YouTube. When we started
That's
out doing
fantastic.
YouTube, it would be 90 seconds between the time I said it and the time somebody else heard it. And can you imagine trying to have an interactive conversation with folks in a chat room, or to have an interactive conversation with somebody at the dinner table, but they're not allowed to reply for a minute and a half after you say it?
It's so exciting to be alive right now. Look, you're talking to somebody where it took a minute and a half to 2 minutes for my dial-up modem to connect over the telephone lines with the internet back in the day.
Now, what was that? Was that a 300, or a 52K modem?
Exactly. Yeah, it was.
Right.
It was something that does bring back memories. I haven't heard that terminology in a long time. But here's the thing: what I'm seeing happen is with our mobile devices right now. Everything you and I are talking about can be digested and oftentimes created with our mobile devices. And for shows like this, where right now it's still a challenge to create and produce a show with our mobile device, in 5 years it's going to be a couple of pushes of our buttons and we'll be rocking and rolling. People need to understand that more people around the world have access to these right here, to a smartphone connected to the internet, than they do drinking water, than they do working toilets. This is the future of what we're doing. It's a game changer. And so by what I think is going to happen, Tom, especially when I see my kids who are 22 and 17, they take all of this for granted. It's technology, right? And so sharing something really, really cool, if I hold up and I'm just going to roll the bar, I'm going to roll the dice. I'm going to live dangerously right now. But on my way in today, well, you can barely see it. This is what I picked up. This is from Starbucks. Okay, I honestly don't have the Starbucks logo covered on purpose. I can't get this off. It's stuck. But the point is people expect to be able to be themselves and just show what they're doing. Okay, copyright, trademark, trade name protected or not. And I do see the world and I see the law evolving to allow that to happen in a more user-friendly situation. And I think that's a good thing. Now, Tom, just so you know, I've got about 5 more minutes and then
Okay.
I'm gonna run.
All right.
Okay.
Good. Let's. Here's a question. Somebody says, when I type out the copyright symbol, the C with the circle around it, 2017, my name, all rights reserved, does that actually make something copyrighted? Can you
No.
offer an opinion on that?
Yes, I can offer opinion. You don't need to do that. If you're the creator of copyrighted material, then you have the legal right and the legal copyright to that. By sharing that symbol, you're putting a little icing on the cake, shall we say. You're putting the world on express notice that you're the creator of that content.
Okay. Okay. So you don't have to specifically put a copyright symbol on something to keep somebody else from copying it illegally. Okay.
That's correct, and you don't have to file anything with the government either.
And you don't have to. Okay. Now,
No, but listen,
trademarks are
but
different.
real-
Trademarks
but
are
real-
different than copyrights. Yeah.
But real quick, let me just share that by doing so, by filing, okay, you're protecting your rights more thoroughly, and you may be creating additional rights and your entitlement to damages if you get into litigation. But to answer your original question, no, you don't have to do any of that to protect your copyrighted material. Once you create it, it's yours.
Got it. Okay. All right. I think you've done such a great job of covering the subject that nobody has a question. Although I looking in the chat room, some of them are kind of got lost on the 300 baud modem, and they just went off into the thicket on that one. Yep. Yeah.
Those were the days.
The technology really has reached the point where I can say the promise of technology now that I understood 20 years ago has actually been achieved. That you can do the things that people promised you'd be able to do. Now you really can.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
it's pretty cool. It's
Mitch,
a global community.
You have been a real champ to come on the show and let me grill you like this. I really appreciate your time. If people want to follow you, they can do that at mitch.social, mitch.social, and they can see what you're up to. They can see the show that you're going to do slightly, and you've got a blog called streaming.lawyer that they can follow you on too. So you may pick up Well, you won't pick up any clients from this bunch. They're a bunch of cheapskates, but you may get some questions.
I'll settle for a few friends.
There
I
you
mean,
go.
that's
There you
honestly,
go.
Tom, after 30 years of doing what I'm doing, what I enjoy about social is building new relationships. I enjoy, like I said, just trying to show the community that, there are a lot of hardworking lawyers. I married one, I met her in law school. I'm still in love with 28, 30 years later, that we try to do the right thing.
You
And we're
better
here
know
for,
what that number is. Yeah.
yeah, it's 28. Okay.
Okay.
It's 28. But we've been practicing together for 30 years. And, yeah, she told me, Tom, when we got married, I could make all the important decisions. We just haven't had any yet. So it's all good. Hey, listen, I've got to run. Thank
Good.
you very much for having me on today's show. I'm here for you and anyone else. If you have any questions, just reach out. It's always a pleasure.
Mitch, it was a treat. Thank you for coming on.
All right.
Folks,
Thanks, Tom. Bye-bye.
send your thanks to Mitch. And Mitch, we appreciate you coming on. You can cut your Zoom feed anytime you want to. Love to hear your feedback on this. You can register it now in the chat room. We're going to close out the show here in just a minute. You're welcome, if you're watching us live, to join us for the post show. We have some refreshments today. We have some mixed nuts, but that's mostly you guys. And then of course I've got my lemonade. If you just stumbled in, you're wondering what in the world has this what is this show? What's been going on? This has been Streaming Idiots. Streaming Idiots is a production of Eastern Shore Broadcasting, my company, in Fairhope, Alabama, where we help folks learn how to stream. We do coaching. We sell all sorts of goods and services like custom PCs for streaming. Some of the more difficult to find items like capture cards and X-key controllers, PTZ cameras from PTZ Optics, streaming software from vMix, and I also design and build custom PCs for folks that want to do serious streaming. And you can get more information there at easternshorebroadcasting.com on that one. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Oh yeah, next week, R.J. Murdoch. You remember R.J. was the studio that we visited last week. R.J. Murdoch is going to be on the show to talk about streaming basketball. So if you're into sports streaming, you really want to tune in and see his setup. He's got a really neat setup, multi-cameras, running on a laptop, lots of cool different devices that he's using to make his life easier. So you won't want to miss that. On behalf of all the staff, here at Eastern Shore Broadcasting, I'm Tom Sinclair. It's been a treat to have you with us today, and we'll see you next time.